Now, so let's go to clip 3, which discusses the promises, the broken promises we made after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Washington was adamant in its firm support of NATO's open door policy, even though the apparently defensive alliance was from the very outset aimed against Russia, back then the USSR.
So if Kremlin's aim is to have less NATO on its borders, it will only get more NATO.
This appeared to be a 180-degree turnaround of former agreements. Here's a map of NATO members in...
Back it up. That guy that said that if they want less NATO, they're going to get more NATO?
Yeah.
That was the head of NATO.
Well, Jens? Was that Stoltenberg?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So if Kremlin's aim is to have less NATO on its borders, it will only get more NATO.
This appeared to be a 180-degree turnaround of former agreements. Here's a map of NATO members in 1990 and in 2022. So the promises were broken, not once, not twice, but 14 times. That's how many countries have become NATO members since the 90s. Yet now, NATO and co., cheered on by the mainstream media, pretend like there were no promises at all.
I would like to state once again that neither the 2+4 agreement nor the NATO-Russia Founding Act contained promises to Russia that NATO would not expand to the east. The 2+4 agreement does not mention this issue at all, and any statements to the contrary do not correspond to reality.
Where is that written down? Where is that promise written down?
It's actually right here. The minutes of a March 6, 1991 meeting in Bonn between political directors of the foreign ministries of the US, UK, France, and Germany.
We had made it clear during the 2+4 negotiations that we would not extend NATO beyond the Elbe. We could not therefore offer Poland and others membership in NATO.
Is it any surprise then that Moscow has become distrustful? All it wanted was a document with legally binding security guarantees, but it seems that the West was never interested in this. The same way it was never interested in keeping its promises to force Ukraine to implement the Minsk Accords. Kiev pledged decentralizing reforms to provide broad autonomy to the eastern regions that declared independence in 2014. Instead, Kiev launched what it called an anti-terrorist operation in the breakaway republics.
Yeah, there was the treaty on the final settlement with respect to Germany, the 2+4.
Yes, that's when it all began.
Mm-hmm. That was 1990, and that makes sense. Well, you have one more clip, right?
Yeah, they cut Germany loose and with these promises that were never fulfilled. The last one is I call guilt trip, because one of the things that we're starting to witness, or we've been witnessing, is the Ukrainians guilt tripping us. And here we go.
The fact that over 14,000 people were killed in the Donbass since 2014 didn't seem to concern or to be noticed by the international community. The West also closed its eyes to the fact that many of the volunteer battalions accompanying the Ukrainian military in their fight against the rebels had nationalist backgrounds. After years of stalemate and suffering, the Donbas republics requested Russia's help in putting an end to what they perceived as Ukrainian military aggression. Russia sees their military operation as a defense of these people. Of course, the Western narrative is one of aggression, despite their own military interventions in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and Serbia, to name just a few.
Yeah. Hey, you guys do this all the time.
We came, he saw, he died.
So going back in time, 1990, the wall came down, East and West Germany reunified at the very moment of this agreement, the 2+4 talks and the final settlement treaty with regards to Germany. Who was around at that time? And you pegged it on the last episode. Our buddy George Soros, and he has here's a quick clip of him speaking at the Asia Society, a fine think tank. And, he was quite, it seems like he was quite involved.
When the Soviet Union, the Soviet Empire collapsed, and as the empire collapsed, I moved in and picked up the pieces. First in Hungary in 1984, and then Poland in 87, China in 87 as well. So this is how this the Soros Empire was replacing the Soviet Empire.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, what a clip.
I'm thinking he's running the 1990 playbook again. For himself, at least.
Well, the Russian ruble's a great play.
Yeah. I mean,
you collapse the thing to nothing and then you just buy it?
That seems to be the way he does things.
Yeah, he's good at it.
But he even said, I moved in. Yeah, I moved in Hungary, and I moved in. And the Soros Empire is more powerful. The
Hungarians got a clue, and they kicked him out for good.
Yeah. And he says the Soros Empire is more powerful than the Russian Empire. Okay.
So here is continuing with this. Here's an interesting analysis. This is from a professor, Kuzmarov. And he's another one of these guys. He's on RT again, and he's talking about Zabrinsky. He sees him as the real.
Wait, who's Zabrinsky again?
Zabrinsky,
That's Brzezinski. Who's Zabrinsky?
Brzezinski. What did I say? Brzezinski.
It says Zabrinsky.
I said Zabrinsky. I said Zabrinsky because I wrote Zabrinsky on the clip.
No, you didn't even write that. You wrote
Brzezinski.
You wrote Zabrinki. Brzezinski.
Zabrinki.
Mika's dad.
Brzezinski.
Okay. Yes. All right.
Everybody's friend.
All right. Mika's dad.
Here, in your latest article today, you brought up Jimmy Carter's National Security Council advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, and how his spirit kind of lives on in the Biden administration.
Oh.
It's a very interesting and insightful read, but I want you to tell our viewers about it and kind of what's going on with Russia in regards to the United States.
Well, I think, what's not reported in the media is the provocations. I mean, it's as if, Thursday, everything started on Thursday when the invasion happened. Nothing happened before. But, for years, the United States was provoking Russia in different ways. And my hypothesis is that this was really a plan because, Zbigniew Brzezinski was this ardent Russophobe whose dream was, and he was from Polish and of the Polish nobility. And his dream was to bring down the Soviet Empire, and he armed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan with the goal of inducing, and he said this in an interview, with the goal of inducing a Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. That would be the Soviets' Vietnam, and that would be the end of the Soviet Empire. And then years later, when they asked him, well, what about Al-Qaeda? He said, oh, that's nothing. We brought down the Soviet Empire and liberated Europe and, Central Europe. And I think the mindset of the U.S. government is the same. I mean, Brzezinski died in 2017, but people like Victoria Nuland and other neoconservatives within both Trump and Biden administrations, I think have the same worldview as Brzezinski, and they promote these schemes like human beings don't matter. It's all about advancing U.S. power, and they've had a vendetta against Vladimir Putin since he gave a speech in Germany, kind of denouncing U.S. unipolar power and some of the excesses of U.S. foreign policy that the two guests were discussing. He became public enemy number one. And so the question is, what kind of scheme can we develop to bring him down? And I think they've developed this. They provoked him for years, and they knew eventually he would respond, and then they could draw him into, I think their calculations that Ukraine will be a quagmire like Afghanistan, and they can make him look bad in the international media and ratchet up these sanctions, which will cripple the Russian economy and fuel disaffection with Putin and ultimately rebellion. So I think that's their grand plan. Whether it works, I don't know. Probably not, but it's hard to predict.
Well, okay. So George is freewheeling it now? Does he have someone else to do Zbignew's business?
I don't know. It's a mess.
Uncle Don told me a story about Zbigniew Brzezinski. He did not like him, and here's why. Because one time he was supposed to go over there and play tennis on Brzezinski's court, and for some national policy discussion. But Don played golf, he played tennis, everything. That's what you do when you're in the intelligence community. Obama, and he won. And it was a big mistake. Don said to me, I think I should have let him win. This was not the way it was supposed to go. And Brzezinski was mad at him ever since.
One of those guys.
On my own court. Can't believe you didn't let me win. Yep. So that makes sense from a geopolitical standpoint, from the globalist standpoint. But is Putin so stupid? Or is there something else at play? Are there other reasons?
He's going to do a Georgia thing. He's going to be out of there next week.
In the next 4 days, yeah.
Well, it might take a little longer, but so I have 3 clips I want to play, and this is about the old WikiLeaks. I mean, WikiLeaks still shows up in the news because WikiLeaks put out a burn. This when the ambassador to Russia was concerned about this NATO encroachment, and so are a bunch of other people. And, of course, we don't talk about it in our news media, but somebody else does. And let's play Old Leaked Burns WikiLeak.
This is, as I say, a consequence of a consistent pattern of violations of international law by us, by the United States, and by NATO. I think that it would have been super easy for the Western powers to accept that the best solution would be to have a declaration of neutrality for Ukraine, and then Ukraine could have the best relations, commercial and otherwise, with the West and with the East. But we have here a problem of an information war in which the level of lying, the level of fake news and fake history and fake law has reached such points that people cannot talk to each other.
A former U.S. ambassador to Russia warned Washington years ago that NATO enlargement could provoke a direct response from Moscow, but was seemingly ignored. The concerns were highlighted in a cable sent from Moscow, which was later made public by WikiLeaks.
Ukraine and Georgia's NATO aspirations not only touch a raw nerve in Russia, they engender serious concerns about the consequences for stability in the region. Russia would have to decide whether to intervene, a decision Russia does not want to have to face.
In the diplomatic telegram, the then ambassador William Burns also said Moscow won't tolerate its security concerns being ignored, adding that the Kremlin believe the question of NATO membership would divide Ukraine, as the ethnic Russian community there wholly opposed joining the alliance. Burns concluded it could potentially lead to civil war.
Again, RT using an artificial computer voice.
You can point it out every time.
And I want to, because pretty soon that's what the news is going to be everywhere.
I agree. So let's play part 2 of this little series for the kicker.
Well, this leaked document is particularly significant because it is from a former U.S. ambassador to Russia who is right now the CIA director.
Yes, and this guy's a problem. He's a huge problem. Yes. Yeah.
And if you want the double kicker, just all the other people that wrote kind of the same memo, part 3.
He is hardly the only or the first one to address these issues of NATO expansion eastward into Ukraine, the dangers that presents as a what would be perceived by Russia as an existential national security threat, and also threatened to destabilize Ukraine. George Kennan, the geostrategic father of the U.S. policy of containment against the Soviet Union, said the same thing. Jack Matlock, former U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, the last U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union when it dissolved, said the same thing. Bill Clinton's defense secretary, William Percy, said the same thing. In fact, he felt so strongly about the dangers of NATO expansion to the east towards Russia that he considered resigning over it. So the question is, why did they ignore all of these voices, these eminent voices in international relations and on Russia doing it? Because it is perceived now to be to U.S. Geopolitical objectives to expand into Ukraine, so that Ukraine is no longer a neutral state on Russia's borders at all costs.
Yeah, this is a great story, and it got no play. I think I saw one maybe link about it somewhere on Twitter before it got removed. It's real. This is good that we're playing the RT side of this, because RT has been deplatformed.
Yeah.
You can barely, you have to refresh 3, 4, 5 times to get one page to work. Oh, really? You're going through VPN, of course, because you're smart. You get no spam and you're great.
I don't get spam. I'm great.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah.
No, I don't have any problems with getting RT. I use a VPN. I come in through Argentina, where all the ex-Nazis were. Makes nothing but sense.
Yeah. I'm hearing that a lot of the Nazis in Operation Paperclip, that many of them stayed in Ukraine and didn't make the trek over.